Hi, so my name is Nayeli, for those who may not know. So today I'll be talking about the psychological effects of immigration on children who have been taken from their parents. This can be early on in their age, adolescents, or teenagers. So I'm going to talk to you about some frequently asked questions. So I'm going to start off with what is an immigrant? What is a refugee? Why don't immigrants want to learn English? Are illegal immigrants taking American jobs? And what do you think are the main misconceptions that people have about immigrants? So these are all frequently asked questions that people may not know the answer or may know a very incorrect answer. So before I get into all those questions and the research, I'm going to give you an overview of what I researched. So, there's numerous asylum seekers, refugees, and internally displaced people worldwide, and it has increased dramatically over the past 5 years. Many countries are trying to resort to detaining asylum seekers and other immigrants. Being able to recognize and appropriately treat mental health problems among new immigrants and refugees in primary care is very challenging, not only because of the difference in language, culture, and other specific stressors associated with migration and resettlement. The children have arrived extensive exposure to trauma and loss before facing additional stressors and a different country. This research aims to identify the high risk and treatment of common mental health problems of immigration. The mental health consequences of detention on adult, adolescents, and children of immigration detainees. There are very consistent evidence that immigration detention had adverse effects on mental health. So being in a detention center is already putting you at risk of having very high stress and trauma. So some keywords that are throughout my whole paper is immigration, which is the action of coming to live permanently in a foreign country. Number two, migrant is used to describe all those who leave their country of origin to arrive to a new country. And number three, refugees, a person who has been forced to leave their country in order to escape war, persecution, and natural disasters. And then there's asylum seeker, a person who has left their home country as a political refugee and is seeking asylum in another way. So there's three phases of migration. There's phase one, which is pre-migration, which is the process of getting ready for migration. Some factors of for some factors are exposure to torture, human trafficking, and it all depends how you choose to come to the new country, which can be illegal or legal. So there's phase two, the actual migration, the actual movement of a country of origin to the new one, which can be very dangerous depending on how you plan to enter the new country. Then there's phase three, which is post migration, the process of adapting to a new country and culture. Some factors include looking for asylum, procedures, prohibition from working, poverty, poor housing are very significantly associated with poor mental health also, immigrants. So there's three types of immigrants. There's the lawful permanent resident, is someone who has a green card, who has permission to live and work in the United States but is not eligible for certain benefits such as voting and social services. Number two, which is the undocumented immigrant, and does not have permission to live or work in the United States and is at risk of deportation. There's number three, which is the temporary visitor. It's someone who has permission from the government, usually in the form of a visa, to live in the United States for limited periods of time for a specific purpose like studying, working, and visiting family or tourism. So there's a very large U.S. immigrant group. When people think of immigration, immigrants, they automatically think of Mexico or Hispanics and stuff like that. No. There's so I'm going to give you a list and I'm going to put the percentage of the amount there is in the United States according to the 2018 study. So Guatemala is at a 2.3%. There's Korea at a 2.3%. There's Dominican Republic at a 2.6%. There is Cuba at a 3.0%. Vietnam at a 3.0%, El Salvador at a 3.2%, Philippines at a 4.5%, China at a 5.5%, India at a 5.9%, in Mexico at a 5.9%, and then there's another category of just others, and that is 18,007,1200 people. That is a 41.8%. So it's not just Mexicans, there's a lot of different ethnicities that are also involved in immigration here in the United States. So, what are the consequences of immigration in detention centers, you may ask? So, here I'm going to tell you. It differentiates between adults and children, of course. When comparing children of detained or deported parents with peers whose parents were either here illegally, permanent residents, or documented, it indicates a higher level of symptoms of PTSD and trauma in children that have been here and have been detained themselves. Detention itself may compromise children's developmental and psychological health, as well as aggravating extending trauma, and it also leads to breakdown of a family. The detention center environment may underline parenting abilities and leave parents feeling disempowered and may struggle with their own mental difficulties. Factors related to migration that affect mental health or children with pre-migration stages are the age and developmental stage of migration, disruption of education, and separation from extended family and friends. This is all very hard, not only in the parents, but it's also very hard in the children. And even if they want to say they're okay, they're not okay. So which states detain the most immigrants? So there's 5 top states. So number one, of course, Texas with 15,852, California with 6,527, Arizona with 3,869. There's Georgia with 3,717, and Louisiana with 3,143 are the top 5 states with the largest number of people in the U.S. Immigration Detention Center per day. This is not, this number of all of them are all the people who are being detained per day. That's how many, which is crazy to even think that all those people are being detained every single day, but they are. So there's a lot of things that go into a detention center. They obviously look at the amount of beds they have, the average of the cost of the guards, the average of welfare care, and there's other direct costs. And when you look at a graph, there's about this much beds, and you have here the average of welfare costs and then the average of direct costs. So there's not a lot of resources for the amount of people that are being detained every single day. So how many people are being detained in a private immigration prison? So according to the federal government data, over 16% of the people are held privately run immigrant prisons. For example, the GEO Group, the Correctional Corporation of America, CoreCivic together detain approximately 15,000 people in immigration detention per day. As well as you're detaining the people publicly, but you also have 15,000 people you're detaining per day and are privately owned. So who's held in the immigration detention? The U.S. government does not maintain reliable demographics of who is in the immigration detention, although the government data indicates that the median age of person deported by ISIS is 30 years old. Freedom of Immigrants data collected for thousands of intakes with people in immigration detentions between 25 to 35 years old. So those are still parents, like those are people who already have their families here in the United States, have built a home, have built a life, and they're being detained by ISIS, and their children are being also taken away and taken to a detention center, which is like opposite directions of where they're going. So this is all very hard. So this research searches and puts together literature and prevalence and risk factors of common mental health problems related to migration, the effect of cultural influences on health and illness, and clinical strategies to improve mental health care for immigrants and refugees. 10 studies reported data of mental health children and families within the context of detention. This reviews report 629 children and young people across 9 studies. 302 parents across 5 studies. 7 studies were conducted when the participants were in the detention center, and 3 were conducted after they got out of the detention center. And this research is all from 2018 and up to date. So just think about that while you're learning about this. All children advance at least one psychiatric disorder, most frequently, of course, depression, anxiety, and PTSD. The overwhelming majority struggle with sleeping disorders, and that's 65 to 100% said that. 100% said that they struggle with eating disorder. Up to 50% said they have suicidal thoughts. 25 to 80% has self-harm. And those are all the participants of all the age range. So you have kids that are from 3 years old all the way to 65-year-olds. So the data is a telephone administrated psychiatric interviews and a self-reported measures for nearly completed samples of detainees, family, and unspecified ethnicities. But just think about all the ethnicities I named. Those are all the people who are being tested and are being researched, and they are going through these procedures. The age of 3 to 6 also had developmental delay and regression. It included frequent crying and withdrawals, almost 100% across the board of the group 3 to 6. There was also 100% disturbed sleep routines across the early age group, and only 50% had problems with language barriers. So even though there's so many bad things like thrown at them, 50% is still not a lot. Like I was expecting when I did this like at least 75%, because learning a new language, trust me, by previous experience, is very, very hard. And I can't imagine with people who already have mental health and they're already downing themselves. Like, I had an amazing support system. That's the only reason why I'm speaking like this, and even through this video you see me struggling, because it's hard sometimes. But just keep in mind, like, these are children who are going through all of this. And 13%, so back to the research, and 13% experienced bedwetting, which was also in the age range where they were already potty trained, but since they already had so many mental health issues and they don't have the proper help and psychologists and stuff like that, they will like start going backwards instead of going forward. So everything they learn, they just kind of forget about it, and then they just start going back ages. So someone who's 7 years old may start acting like they're 3 because they don't have the proper directions from their parents since they're in a detention center. However, at the same time, the number of traumatic events may not have differed across the groups. The frequency, severity of the context in those events were often not assessed, so they were not good. Multiple designs, as well as diversity in methodology and instruments used, are across all the studies. Nevertheless, isolating the effects of detention alone remains a complex task, and additional research is needed in order to establish the mental health trajectories in detainees, from the very early days of being arrested to being detained. Finally, the frequent reliance on a range of self-report questionnaires, which have often not been validated, especially for those used in detainee populations, may be problematic. Although it was a very new view, it was unlikely this significantly affect an overall validity of the findings. Moreover, the measures and often focus solely on the symptoms of PTSD, depression, and anxiety, which may fail to investigate other disorders as schizophrenia and other affective disorders as may be caused by refugees as a whole. So even though the studies were focused mainly on like depression, anxiety, and PTSD, which are all very stressors that we know we study every single day, they failed to look at more. They forgot to keep going more in depth of what they actually might have. Like, they might not only have PTSD or depression, they might also have schizophrenia, they might have other mental health disorders that people did not want to look into because they didn't have the resources. So refugees and other immigrant children often come to a host country with histories of multiple traumatic experiences. These children and their families struggle with multiple stressors that may inflict additional trauma and will escalate mental health symptoms and resettlement. Despite the demonstrated mental health need and risk for additional exposure to risk factors, the youth often did not seek for help due to the multiple barriers, like the language. Like, I might say I have a problem, but since I don't speak the English or the language in that hosted country, I cannot go to a psychologist and tell them all my problems because they will not understand me. These problems, this program's most targeted multiple domains in social ecology, since the migration experience can impact not just the children's psychological well-being, but also family functioning and social support. Furthermore, the host community, which is the new country of resettlement, capacity to integrate and support migrant children and family can be productive, even if it's a phase of previous trauma experiences. The Trauma System Therapy of Refugees is a school-based program that was developed to meet the unique needs of refugees and other immigrant children. Those school-based interaction an effective way to introduce those to these services. So TSTR harness, this is an access to migrant children and their family by providing the services in school and at home. Approaches such as TSTR move away from what is wrong with the children to what we can do and what we need to do that for the child's social ecology to reduce stressors and promote positive outcomes. These resources are efforts to be in the right path and actually build a foundation where they shouldn't feel like they're being targeted. They shouldn't feel like they will never get out of this dark hole. So I think the TSTR was like the most interesting thing that I read about throughout this whole research, and I'm 100% behind. So the significance of this research is to shine a light of the importance of children's mental health, but not only the normal children, but also those who are immigrants and refugees. It's important people pay attention to how important it is to help immigrants and refugees to get the help they need by psychologists out all around. Throughout the research, you learn all the behaviors and mental impacts that pre-migration, migration, and post-migration have on youth, the middle, and the older children. You will see that it goes from having problems at sleeping at night, wetting the bed, language delays, even some educational problems. The number of people who are forcibly displaced worldwide is so large and it just keeps growing. We just need psychologists talking about it. We need to build programs just like the TSTR. We need to encourage other psychologists, even if that's not their interest, just encourage them to read about it, do some research, and try to come together to build programs, because getting them early help can prove a lot of the issues that they might run into when they're older. And all these studies had a different result, and it showed and detailed what they were going through. So it was very interesting for me to read. I hope you guys enjoy this research. I'm also going to leave a link in the subscription. Look at me, a YouTuber. In the box, and I'm gonna give it to Miss Fry as well. I wrote a letter because the coronavirus is going around. So I wrote a letter to the government, and it's just pretty much stating how we need to get the children in the detention center health. We need to make sure they're okay, and we need to make sure that someone is giving them the proper care, because people are dying every single day. So we need to make sure that we're doing something good, even if we're at home sitting all day doing homework. Just make sure you have a very positive outcome out of all this coronavirus situation. So if you guys want to sign the letter, it will be submitted by your email. I think it's a very, very, very good thing that we all do it. So I hope you guys enjoy my presentation. So bye.